Hi, I'm Teresa. I'm a tutor. And let's talk about your child who struggles with reading. How do you actually get your kid to read better? Just a heads up, my dog is right over here on the floor, so if you hear a dog, it makes sense. So here's the thing with reading. It's actually like the most complex skill we have little kids do. And the English language is complicated. So a little bit of English history, because why not? In 1066 in England was the Norman Conquest. So from about 449 to 1066 in England, there were 4 Germanic tribes, and the primary English language was Germanic. In 1066, the Normans, who were the Norse, who spoke French. Yeah, a lot of history I'm not going into. Anyway, they took over the nobility in England. And in fact, for like over 100 years, the nobility and the crown didn't even speak English. They spoke French. And because of this, the English language doubled. And because of this, things that we see that the nobility would have seen, like dead animals on the plate for dinner, are of French origin. So like beef, pork, and poultry, the French equivalents are boeuf, pork, and poulet. You hear the similarity? Versus when we see the alive animal, which the peasantry would have handled, we've got cow, pig, and chicken, which are of Germanic origin. And if you ever notice that the basic words for things are very Germanic in origin, versus the fancy word for things tend to be French in origin or French-er sounding. I know, that's not English. More French. There we go. Proper grammar here. So because of this, English is friggin' complicated. We have Germanic vowel sounds and we have French vowel sounds. English has some of the most complex vowel sounds. Like most of our vowels have 2 to 3 different sounds. Not to mention, some of our consonants are subjective based on the letters around them. Like a G is a G sound unless it's followed by an E and sometimes an I. Same thing for C. It's usually a K sound unless it's followed by an E and sometimes an I, in which case it's an S sound. And because of this huge vocabulary, because of these complex letter sounds, English is hard to read, not to mention knowing all the nuance in definitions. Like, what's the difference between hate and loathe? Like, hating is to really dislike something a lot and thoroughly, but to loathe something is even more than hate, right? Just like there's nuance and subtlety in this language that is very complicated. Any foreign language speaker will tell you. Like learning Spanish, just, every letter has one way to pronounce it. I can read a book in Spanish, not understand a single word of it, and pronounce it pretty decently. Like, it is so easy. But, if you've ever had a word with O-U-G-H, like rough, laugh, through, those are all O-U-G-H, totally different ways to pronounce it. And just to really run how complicated this is home, there is a YouTube video I'm going to link in the description that is actually an excerpt of the I Love Lucy show, where Ricky Ricardo is trying to read a book to their infant child. Well, he's reading it to her to prove he can, and all the O-U-G-H, which is some of the most complex shit in English language, he messes up every single time, and it is absolutely hilarious to watch. Link in the description. Definitely go have a look at it, because it is very funny if you understand the language stuff behind it. But yeah, English sucks. It is hard. And reading is one of those skills that we front load children with. If they aren't reading about to grade level by 3rd grade, The words only get marginally harder after third grade, but the subtleties in the language, the double entendres, ironies, the complexity of the meanings, the metaphors, similes, like all this stuff where they're saying something but not directly saying it, that gets more complicated. Symbolism, that's the word I'm looking for. Symbolism really gets more complex. The reading doesn't get harder, the meaning behind the reading does. Because everything is so subjective and situational when it comes to reading, practice is the most important thing. So, how do you get your kid to read every day? And, more importantly, to like reading every day? Now, the ideal circumstance, get reading to be a daily occurrence and a culture in your family. And in ideal circumstances, you start the minute your kid can sit up. Yeah, they don't speak English, they can't read, they can't tell you one color from another, but they can sit and they like cuddling. And that's key, because reading is cuddle time, and it's quiet time, and it's getting ready for bedtime. So you have your kid in your lap, and your arms are in front of them holding the book open, and you read to them. And once they get kind of past the babble stage and they're starting to be able to talk to you in short sentences, this is the perfect opportunity to start familiarizing them with the alphabet. So you've got the book open in front of them, and you're reading along, and you're reading and you say, what's that letter right there? And you point at it. It doesn't matter if they don't know it. They're like 3 years old. But you say, that is an O. Do you know what an O sounds like? Now, O is complicated. It has two sounds. Aw and O. So, but you're looking for the ah, right? Of course. Otter. So you say, it says ah. Boy, it says O. Can you say ah? And you have them say ah. And then sometimes it says oh. Can you say oh? And then they say oh. And it's like, very good. Can you say oh? And then they say oh. And now you turn this into a game. Reading is now fun. And then you say, so of course the minute I knocked on the door. And then you keep reading. And you move on because you made your point. And they got that little bit of practice. They're not going to memorize the alphabet with this, but they will have familiarity with it by the time they reach kindergarten and they actually have to start memorizing the letters. And because you do this every day, you read 2 books before bed, for example, and you get good books. Don't get crappy books. Get good books. This is an amazing book. Get Where the Wild Things Are, or Hecate Peg, or The 7 Chinese Brothers, or The Rough-Faced Girl. Get the good books. They don't have to be able to read these books, but get the good ones and read to them every day. And do them in voices, because, you'll be reading their favorite books over and over and over again. You could probably memorize them and read them as well as an audiobook reader. And here's the thing. Some people will want to go on YouTube or Audible or whatever and have them, have the technology read to your kids. It's the human connection that really works. When technology reads to your kids, there is no incentive for them to read along. There is no connection between the words on the page and anything, because there is no finger pointing. When audiobooks read to your kid, they're just listening and looking at the pictures. There's very little connection. You being there, reading in their ear, pointing at things, having them interact, that's the connection. That gets their brain engaged. That creates mental stimulation that makes them think. And you want that connection between reading and thinking. Now, you didn't do this when they were little and now they're in kindergarten or first grade and they're struggling to read. It's okay to start doing it now. Once they start having to read every day it is very important that they actually sit and do their reading every day. 20 to 30 minutes. Kindergartners only can really focus for about 10 minutes. First graders, you can probably extend about 20 minutes. And second graders can definitely do 30 minutes of focus. So there's a couple of things to do to help your kid. First of all, when they're doing their official reading for the day, have them sit at a table. You sit next to them and have the book open on the table, because a couple things. One, little kids don't have great motor skills, so holding a book open and trying to point is very hard. You want them pointing, so having it open where they can just hold it with their arms and then read, like going and reading, that they can do. And so have them do it. They are capable. Get them into position maybe, and then have them do it. Have them figure it out. Have them struggle a little bit. A little struggle actually helps them figure out things and do it better, because then there's an incentive to remember, because the challenge and overcoming the challenge helps with memory, because it signifies to their brain that this is important for them to remember. And then have them struggle through words. There are kids, a lot of kids do this. They look at it, don't know it, and then they sit back and... So it's like, okay, so what do we do when we don't know? We sound it out. So let's take it letter by letter. So what's that first letter? R. What's it sound like? Er. And then what's the next letter? U. What does a U sound like? Well, actually, probably U. They don't know. U's one of those that comes later usually, so they'll probably go, And then you say it goes, So then you have them say, And then the N, And then you have them put it together, Then you tell them don't stop in between. Just keep your voice going as you sound it out. Run. And then have them do it faster and faster until they can say run. And that's how you teach them how to sound it out. Every time they have to stop, have them sound it out. And then if they have more than one word that they have to sound out in a sentence, have them read the sentence again. Have them keep reading it until they basically memorize it, and then they can see Jane run. And now they understand it. So who is running? Jane. And at this point, you've worked not just on their fluency, which is their ability to say words correctly when they're reading. You've also worked on their comprehension, which is them understanding what they've read. And you do that for level appropriate books. I'm going to have another video actually showing you what kinds of books kids should be able to read at certain grade levels and certain parts of the year. That's coming next week. Now, if there's a word that they really struggle with, like they mess it up 2 or 3 times, have them practice it. Not just out loud, have them write it down. Because your kid can learn from seeing, visual, they can learn from hearing, audio, or they are learning by feel, which is kinesthetic learning. So to hit them on all 3 things, have them physically write the word, say the letters out loud. So there's visual, auditory, and kinesthetic learning happening at the same time. And then after they finish writing the word, have them say it out loud. If they do this in red erasable pen or red colored pencil, this will help trigger memory better. It's not required, but if you have it, it's better. And yes, they will make mistakes writing. Make sure their writing is neat and that you can read it. It doesn't have to be perfect. It has to be legible. Do it 5 times. So run, R-U-N, run, R-U-N, run, R-U-N, run, R-U-N, run, R-U-N, run. And if you do this 5 times, now they are in charge of the word. They have practiced it. Then you reread the sentence, the whole sentence, and they should get the word correct at that point. And then you can move on. This isn't perfect memory. It might take practicing really hard words a few times, but by having this process, they can practice the things that are hard a little bit more. As they improve on reading, and especially if you notice that the same thing trips them up, like two vowels. That's why we have rhymes, like when two vowels go a-walking, the first one does the talking. The second one stays quiet. Because remember, it's all about connections and understanding these rules. Then you have them point at the letter that says his own name. So R-E-A-D is the E, because it's E-A. The E says his name. He says E. So R-E-D. And another one that trips up kids a lot, silent E at the end. So you point and say, what's the rule? You point at the E and say, what's the rule? And they look, silent E. So that other vowel says his name. And if there's ever something they need to memorize, have them say it 10 times and count it on your finger. What are the vowels? A-E-I-O-U. What are the vowels? A-E-I-O-U. Vowels, A-E-I-O-U. And you just do it 10 times. Because here's the thing, some kids need more practice than others. Some will catch it really quickly and it'll be fine and you don't need to do all this, but some kids will really struggle. This isn't a natural way of thinking. So with this practice and with daily practice, they will start recognizing situations. And with this practice and this memorization of the rules, because remember, English has a ton of rules, they will get it slowly but surely. And it does take doing it every day. And by every day, I mean like 6 days a week. And then after they've done their reading, you can calm it down by having them pick a book and having you read to them so that they can see that there is a goal. Now, how do you make this fun? Because let's be honest, most of the books that schools send home kind of suck. Like the kids' books are usually better than like the middle school and high school books. Like, who enjoys reading East of Eden by John Steinbeck? Nobody. My belief is that there is a book for every kid. And the best place for your kid to figure out what kinds of books they enjoy is at the library. And I know some people don't like the library, but here's the thing. It is a great free place for kids to explore and to really feel that books are fun. First, when they're little, libraries have story time, which is usually a fun activities thing. Now, every library does it a little differently, but most of the story times I have experienced have involved reading 2 to 3 stories, have involved singing, have maybe, if they're really fancy libraries, may include some kind of art project as well. Those ones may or may not cost you a little bit, depending on the library, but oftentimes they are very low cost, if not free. So definitely worthwhile because your kid can go get that interaction with other kids, which is some socializing, and you can go and goof off on your phone for 20-30 minutes. Some bookstores also have story time. There's usually kind of an expectation with those that you're going to buy a book, but at the library, no obligation. A library doesn't care if you come, enjoy story time, and then leave without a book. Though, you know what? After story time, your kid's all excited and they just had a great time. Perusing the shelves is wonderful. Little kids will choose books based on the pictures, and that's okay. Some books are for them to read. Some books are for you to read to them. So that is totally okay. Let them pick their books. You will notice after a while they become familiar with the selection at the library. They're probably going to gravitate to the same books over and over. That is okay. This is a great way to give them a wide variety of books without you having to buy them all the time. Because let's face it, kids' books, not very thick. Like, this is the thickest children's book that I have. And don't be surprised if, when your kid is leveling up their reading a little bit, a new book that's a bit harder might take an hour to read. Easy books will take them a few minutes. And something to be also aware of when kids are reading, especially if they're reading the same books over and over and over again, they will memorize them. So if you want it to be a challenge and you're suspecting that they have memorized a book, have them read it backwards. So you're still reading forwards, but you're starting from the back of the book. So I have a student who has this book memorized, for example. So spoiler alert for a book that was first published in 1972, have them read the last page, even in Australia. And then have them read this page. When I went to bed, Nick took back the pillow he said I could keep, and the Mickey Mouse nightlight burned out, and I bit my tongue. And because you're going backwards, because children will memorize a book forwards, they won't necessarily memorize it backwards. So this will create an additional challenge. This is also a good test to see if a kid is actually reading or if they've just memorized. Because one of my childhood friends didn't actually learn how to read until after third grade, between third and fourth grade, because our third grade teacher was the first one to realize that she didn't know how to read. She had memorized books, and she had gotten away pretending to be able to read by reciting the stories she had memorized. And people weren't paying very close attention. This is her parents, her teachers, her grandparents. Everybody who read to her did not realize this girl did not know how to read. And it wasn't until Miss Wonder, our third grade teacher, realized it, told her parents, and got her into a summer school program that actually, for the first time, taught her how to read. She's a huge, voracious reader now, but she totally would like this book. The picture looks like Cinderella. She recited Cinderella or Alice in Wonderland or whatever it was that that looked about right. And because people were just kind of listening in one ear, she passed tests. So taking a kid backwards through a story, can't fake it. Also, this is an incentive to get different books, because if they have Cinderella memorized, but you're suddenly doing the true story of the Three Little Pigs, you'll be able to catch them out. And if you're honestly working through sounding out words with them and the proper practice, there's no reason they can't learn how to read. And libraries help with this with a wide variety of books. But more importantly, to me at least, going to the library and being able to pick out books helps with a different reading skill, which is being able to choose books you enjoy. And starting them young, when it's all picture books and it's based on the cover, that's totally okay. It gets them familiar with the act of perusing. And then once they get onto chapter books, realizing that the cover of a book is targeted to a certain demographic. So a cover might catch your eye, and then reading the back or the inside front cover page. And then reading the first page of the book to see if you can get engrossed in it. That is an extension of being able to pick out your book as a kid, and it's a natural growth. So having a kid, letting them loose in a library, letting them check things out so that they can find something they like, gets them comfortable enough with libraries and how they work, which also helps with bookstores later, if they're ever in Barnes & Noble or a used bookstore. And then they can actually find books that they want to read, and they are more likely to actually enjoy reading because they're going to have a book in their hand that they like. And realizing that although you enjoy a book does not mean your kid enjoys a book. Let's take my family, for example. We're all readers. My parents did all these steps with me when I was a little kid. I love reading. So my dad loves Tom Clancy books. So the military thriller types, I guess you'd call them. I'm not sure. He likes Dan Brown. He likes David Baldacci. He likes Louis L'Amour and Westerns. He does like a little bit of fantasy, but his is more light fantasy versus like high fantasy. He does have, those kinds of books that he really enjoys. He likes mysteries and thrillers. J.A. Jance is another one. You get the idea. My mom, however, really likes nonfiction. And she'll read stuff that's like Civil War, Revolutionary War, World War II kind of informational books. She will read biographies. Like she loves Al Kaline, who apparently was like a baseball player. I don't know. I don't like sports. And she will read that kind of stuff. And so they actually do have some overlap. My dad likes Clan of the Cave Bear, after all, which is fiction, but it's historical fiction based on the time of Neanderthals and Cro-Magnons living together. At the same time, they didn't live together, from what we could tell. They like their different things. And then I love sci-fi fantasy. I will read the occasional biography. I'll read the occasional business help book, which is, it's honestly self-help book, but with a leadership focus. I'll read the occasional nonfiction thing or a biography, especially if it looks like it's going to be humorous. I read a lot of different stuff, actually. I like J.A. Jance, just like my dad, and I'll read the occasional Louis L'Amour. I'll read the occasional biography, like my mom. So, there's overlap with all of us. But, we go to the library, we go to 3 different sections, and that is totally okay. In fact, my dad got this book and purchased it from the library, and he realized he didn't really like it. The names were weird. The cities and everything were a little bit too, he just didn't get into it. I read it and loved it. I now have all 5 books in the series. So, there's a nice sharing thing that can happen, especially if a book isn't to your taste, but maybe somebody else in your family loves it. That best friend I mentioned earlier who didn't read until after 3rd grade, her family does this with romances. They all enjoy, all the women enjoy romance novels. So one of them will read something and be like, guys, you gotta read this. And then my friend and her sister will both wind up reading it one after the other. And then it kind of becomes this family book club. And then my friend says, Teresa, you gotta read this. And I'm like, but it's romance. And she's like, yeah, but you'll actually like this one. And she was right. I enjoyed it. I can't remember what book that was, but I get involved because I'm a friend. And this is how enjoying books helps, because now all of a sudden all 4 of us have read this book that only one of us was going to read originally, and we all enjoyed it, and we had something to talk about and bond over. And you see how reading comes back to the human element, and that's the through line. No matter what you do, reading is a human element, and getting that human element involved, going and socializing at the library, socializing with your friends, book club, finding a book club you enjoy. I can't tell you. Okay, hold on. Let me put this book away. I need my hands free. Okay, I do a summer book club every year. I have done it 2 years in a row now, and I am currently in the process of picking my 3rd one. We did it originally over Zoom. The 2nd year, we managed to do it in person because, the 2 people in the book club were siblings. But I do a fantasy book club because my entire life, book clubs were always about books like the Joy Luck Club. Oh my gosh, the Joy Luck Club winds up in so many book clubs. And they're always these hard, emotionally hitting stories. Somebody suffering for our enjoyment. It just it hits me the wrong way, especially if they're based on true stories. They're a good learning experience. I don't like them. They're not fun for me. Because, reading, you learn how to see from somebody else's perspective, which broadens our horizons. And yes, that's wonderful. But I like my escapism when I'm doing that. So give me a good dragon adventure along with the long-suffering stuff and exploring somebody's really bad negative experience. And I'm more likely to get more out of it than, oh my gosh, and then this awful thing happened and can't these people get a break? My personal opinion, you don't have to agree. We don't have fantasies in school. Because some people see magic as evil, even though most kids from a really young age can tell the difference between fantasy and reality. That's why I wanted to have a fantasy book club, because you can have a book with all the tragedy and emotional depth of a traditional literary novel, and it's not fucking depressing. For example, last year, I did this book with my students. It's fantasy. Dragons are the main characters. It is well written. It is brilliant. It is about 5 dragons who are the dragonettes of destiny, and they were hatched together on the brightest night where the 3 moons were all full, and they were raised for the first 6 years of their life, I believe, because they become adults at the age of 7. Dragon aging, And they have been held in captivity in a cave system under a mountain their entire lives. They had never been out. Their cave had one hole in the ceiling, and that's the only way they could get any sun. And they didn't know anything about their different types of dragons. They didn't know anything about living in the real world or the situations, just what they were told by their caregivers. They wind up having an adventure because they escaped. They wind up escaping and then getting captured by the Skywing dragons. And they wind up having to escape there after seeing some Colosseum fights. There's death. There's having to protect yourself. There's strategy. And they're talking about people who are kind of born and raised in a cult and escaping and having free thinkers and basically the first steps in trying to bring peace to a warring world, as well as seeing the outcomes of war. But because it's a fantasy setting, the violence is kind of acceptable. I mean, this is really for children aged 10 and up. The concepts are very real world applicable. Cults exist in real life, but this is a more tolerable, exciting way to deal with a lot of moral issues. Like, we broke this book into 4 different sections so that we could cover it over 4 weeks. And there was a lot of talking about kind of figuring out some of the mysteries involved. There was a lot of talk about a lot of moral ambiguity. There's a character in here who you think is a bad guy, and then you think she might be a good guy. And at the end, whether she's a good guy or a bad guy is kind of left up for debate, so it's a matter of opinion. And here's the cool thing. It's the first book in a series. These characters show up again and have more character growth as they get along. And one of the kids that in my book club did wind up reading book 2. So, long story short, to get your kid better at reading, you need to read with them every day. Make reading part of your family culture and help them to find books they enjoy. If you do those 3 things and you're consistent about it, you will have your kid voluntarily reading and enjoying books in no time. Anyway, good luck. You're doing a great job. Bye.